My guest today is Bruce Marks, a seasoned lender and the senior vice president of First Bank of the Lake. Bruce has closed over 400 million of deals in 9 years and specializes in serving SMBs and search funds with SBA loans from 2.5 million to 10 million. Thanks a lot for coming to the Holdco Builders podcast, Bruce.
Yeah, Mick, thanks for having me. Look forward to spending the next hour or so with you.
In 2015 was when you did your first search fund loan, but you've spent your whole career almost helping buyers and searchers finance lower middle market M&A transactions. Please tell us, what were you doing before and how did you end up doing what you're doing today?
Well, my first 5 years in banking, after I got out of graduate school, I went to college and then got an MBA degree. I was doing investment management work. So I was on the other side of the table and I was working for a growing bank, and they asked me to think about switching over to the commercial lending division and go through a formal credit training. They thought it would help for my investment background to understand if not only can you lend to somebody or invest in somebody, but understanding all the deal dynamics behind why you would do that. So it was terrific. I got the opportunity to go through a formal lending program and just felt like that was more suited for my background. So I made the switch from investment management to commercial lending. Got an opportunity to join a bank. I was there for a few years, and then I decided that I'd go out on my own and be paid for what it is I know rather than what it is I do, like a consultant. And I had that business for 13 years, and it was very successful. And after that, I got an opportunity to hop back into the banking business. So my career has always been around. My dad had his own business when I was growing up, so it was always kind of very entrepreneurial for me. But I was like a lot of SBA lenders and doing what we call Main Street business acquisitions, small deals, sub $1 million. But you have to remember something, Mick, that when I first started my SBA lending career, the maximum SBA was $500,000, right? And then it went to $2 million, right? Which was a big, big jump. And then obviously it went from 2 million to 5 million. So I have seen the SBA grow tremendously from the first days that I started making my, doing SBA loans. But I was doing smaller transactions, and I joined a bank that had an appetite for doing a little bit larger deals when they raised the limit to 5 million. And there weren't a lot of banks that were willing to look at a $5 million airball. And so I decided that if this is the space I was going to play in, and be an expert in this space, that I had to immerse myself to become better at what it is that I do. So I had always, prior to doing what I call search fund lending, or not what I call, but what I do every day, search fund lending, I had been in and around doing SBA lending. I had my own business for 13 years. So I was an entrepreneur and got the opportunity to start SBA divisions for several banks. And I really liked doing that as an entrepreneur. I liked to watch things build and grow. And even here at First Bank of the Lake, when I joined here 5 years ago this month, we were growing. We were a really small bank. We were sub 300 million in assets, or just around there. I was employee number 13 in our SBA division. And now we're a $1.6 billion bank with 300 people in our SBA division. So my background has always been in entrepreneurial spirits, if you will, growth, building things. And I've just taken all of that experience and the experience beforehand of doing what it is I do, and to make me better at what it is I do for the clients that I serve, right? Because today it's all about, and I post about this a lot on X, is being impactful and helping the folks that reach out to me and helping get their deal to the closing table. That's my number one driver as a lender, is to protect the assets of my institution, which I have to do first and foremost, but at the same time being impactful for those that I interact with to help them get their deal to the closing table so they can learn what it's like to be an entrepreneur as well.
So one moment you decide that it's time to get better at what you do and in your profession. So what did you do to get better? What was the 30, 90, 180-day game plan for you to get better at what you do?
So back in 2014, I was working for a bank, and I got the opportunity to go to a industry conference event. You know, they always have these guest speakers. And there was a guest speaker on there, a gentleman named Nick Nanton. And Nick had written a book called Celebrity Branding You. And Nick got up on the stage and he talked about how people want to do and how people want to deal with celebrities, right? And he said, that's why you always see all these advertisements on TV and they have celebrities advertising them because it lends credibility to it. And so Nick gave a great presentation and it really inspired me to try to become a celebrity at what it is that I do. And I got the opportunity to work with him. And in this book, it laid out a definitive plan of how you do that. And I basically followed his plan. To become an expert, you have to really be excellent at your craft. And so I went back to school and I went back and joined the Alliance of Mergers and Acquisition Advisors and went through their certification program, the CMA program, which is a very diligent but thorough and fantastic course to get my certification as a certified M&A advisor. I then went through NACVI's program of becoming a certified value analyst. And then I was reaching out to conferences and saying, I'd love to become a speaker, where you now become recognized for what it is that you do. And you, instead of you being in the audience, you're the one on the stage. And so I followed this guideline from Nick on how to basically become an expert. So, and it was interesting because several years ago, the Wall Street Journal had put a quote. They were interviewing successful people, and I still have the article here. And they asked me, well, how do you define success? And I said, to me, it's measured by becoming an expert, right? Then letting the marketplace know what it is that you do and what it is that you don't do. So you have to specialize in something. You have to become an expert at it. And then you got to let the marketplace know what it is you do and what you don't do. And if you're successful with those three attributes of building your brand, it's going to take you to the level, however far you want it to take you, right? And I've watched it in my own grow to the level of where it is, and it's great. I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work at the same time, but it's you hear all these professional athletes, follow your dreams, make your dreams come true, and the people that I surrounded myself gave me the right opportunity to do it, and I took advantage of doing it. And now I'm doing that for, this bank, First Bank of the Lake, and watching the bank grow and the bank being impactful to so many people that we lend to. We really get it. We've got an unbelievable board of directors here, a great management team, a great leadership team who loves the SMB space. And it makes it easy when you're working for a lender who really understands what it is that you do and is there alongside you to do it, right? Like I could do this and then I could get with a bank that doesn't understand my model. It's not going to work, right? So it's a great partnership for sure.
It's very interesting because I've had, this is I think episode 71 or 72, talking to business builders, business buyers, investors. And what you just said, like going back to basics, pretty much going back to school to becoming an expert. The other day I had a guy who they're running now. It's a very large franchise in a fast food space. And when he first got started, he decided to go back to basics. So the first year he was working in a kitchen, and this was the school for him. He learned all the basics, and now obviously he can operate all those 10 plus locations. So that's why I see common theme and common attitude in here, that people who would like to go to the top, they're willing to go back down, learn the basics, and then come back up being stronger and so-called expert.
Yeah, I agree.
So back to the basics. Tell me, Self-funded search versus traditional search. Could you explain what is the difference? Maybe pros and cons, and which is better, if it is better, and why?
I don't think that there's better when it comes to traditional search or self-funded search. Traditional search, the difference is pretty clear. Traditional search is where typically after graduate school, you're going to go out and you are going to search on behalf of an investment group. They will pay you for a couple of years to do that. And if you find the right one, you will operate and own a small percentage of the business. They will own the major percentage of the business. They can, if you don't perform as well as they think you can, they can remove you from that seat, right? And ultimately, the goal is to sell that business at some point down the road and cash in your chips. Where a self-funded search is, I'm going to go out and search. I'm typically not getting paid while I'm doing that. I'm paying that myself. But the biggest thing is I'm going to own a majority of that business, the common shares, at the end of the day. I will have the control, which is a big issue with SBA. But I will be personally guaranteeing the loan as well. So there's different risks and as a result, different rewards in both those models. And it just depends upon, as a searcher, what you want. I can share a story of a transaction I did several years ago. And I'll never forget getting the call from the searcher because he was overseas at the time. And he was in LOI to buy a business. And I could tell within 2 or 3 minutes of talking with him, oh man, I wanted to help this guy. He was a smart guy and he knew what he's doing. But he had gone the traditional route. Mm-hmm. They had their exit. And now he was looking for his next thing. And he said, I'm going to do a self-funded because I want to do this for 10, 12, 15, 20. However long, that's not the point. But the however long is on his decision, not the traditional search and the investors that own the majority of the business. It's a big difference because if a searcher comes to me and says, Bruce, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, I'm going to be bored of doing this and I want to get out. Where you see all these entrepreneurs and they go, oh, I've done this business for 5 years and now I'm tired. I want to do something different. Well, maybe the traditional search works well with them. But if an operator comes to me and says, I want to establish roots. I'm moving because my wife's pregnant and we want to be in the so-called geographical location and we're doing a geographical search. And I want to own this business and I want it to be a legacy business and perhaps I want to leave it to my children, then traditional will never work because you're not controlling those purse strings. Is that a good breakdown of the difference?
Perfect. As I did research on you, listening few of the podcast, you said you talk to 3 searchers a day consistently. What are those conversations about? And what do those people want to achieve? Why do they want to do that?
So it's absolutely true. The second week of January, Calendly, which is how I book all my appointments, had sent me a recap for 2024. And in 2024, I had 490 Calendly calls. Now, they just sent that to me. Obviously, so vacation time and time off or conferences while I'm away, you see that translates into, a lot of calls, right? And searchers that I speak with, and I do speak with 3 a day, sometimes more, it's a lot of times just to introduce themselves. They want to make sure that when they find the right one, they have spoken to me or maybe 2 or 3 other SBA lenders if SBA is going to be part of their debt structure. So a lot of the times it's introductions. Hey, Bruce, I want to introduce myself. I want to tell you a little bit about me. I want to find out, If I'm a good candidate, I want to find out if the type of deals that I'm looking for are the type of deals that you want to finance. I want to make sure that I'm well prepared when I come to you. What am I going to need to bring when I come to you? So a lot of them are introductory. A lot of them are, hey, Bruce, I have an executed LOI and I want to go over the deal dynamics with you. And so I love to model live, Mick, with my clients, their deal so they can see it and see if the deal pencils. And oftentimes it doesn't. So I had on X a shirt that I made, congratulations, you've structured a transaction that doesn't work, right? Because they've signed an LOI and yet the deal's not going to, and literally I laugh because I had a conversation this morning with a borrower and I had to say that to him. And he said, and he opened up with, I'm not sure my deal's going to work because I don't think I'm going to have the debt service coverage that your bank is looking for. And people ask me that all the time. Bruce, what's your debt service coverage? And I come back and I go, well, what do you feel comfortable with? Are you going to feel comfortable with the 1.15 or are you going to feel comfortable with the 1.5? I don't know if I would ever do 1.15. And I don't know if even if I'm the buyer, I'm going to feel comfortable with that, right? That's like the noose is too tight around the neck. God forbid the business has a hiccup or a sneeze. So there's a lot of that, right? And then there's a lot of, I want to understand SBA deal dynamics. I want to understand, how the SBA views seller notes, or I want to understand how the SBA views, buying another business once you have one. So I would say that, Mick, those are the three buckets. It's introduction. It's, I have an LOI. I want to see how the deal works, or I have a lot of questions around SBA and SBA criteria. But for me, and I say this all the time, I look at my role as an advisor to my potential clients to help them get their deal to the closing table. SBA is just the funding tool. It's just how we get the deal done. If somebody calls me up and says, I want an SBA loan, but I'm not willing to provide a personal guarantee, then I said, then you can't look at the SBA because that's a program requirement. It's not my requirement. It's an SBA requirement. There are a lot of things in the SBA SOP 501071 that are subject to interpretation, and each bank looks at it differently. But that's one that is standard. If you're getting an SBA loan and you own more than 20% of that borrowing entity, you have to personally guarantee. I can't do anything about that. So yeah, those three things are a lot of the reasons that I get the calls.
Let's say there are two scenarios. Number one, a W-2 employee reaches out, says they'd love to start acquiring companies, starting from one. They have, let's say, 100,000 in cash. So this is scenario number two. And scenario number two, a person has just sold their business, very small business. Let's say they have $500,000 cash liquid, and same thing. They would like to acquire a business. So what do you respond to them? And is the response different between those two stories?
No, because, if you're a W-2 employee and you have $100,000 and you don't want to be a W-2 employee anymore, and mostly it's because people want to control their own destiny. I'm a W-2 employee. I work for First Bank of the Lake. I am thrilled at being a W-2 employee and working at First Bank of the Lake. I love my job. It's a phenomenal job, and I don't think I would want to do anything different than I'm doing now. Only because it gives me both, because it gives me the entrepreneurial ability to do what it is that I do, but yet work for a fantastic company. So the W-2 guy that calls me and says, I've got $100,000. Are you looking to replace your salary? You have to look at what you want to achieve, right? And where you want to go. There's a lot of risks to buying a business, and we see businesses come and we see businesses go, both big and small. there's no guarantee that it's going to work. So sometimes people are willing to take that risk, and sometimes people aren't. The person who has had a business and sold a business and now is $500,000 has already been through it, right? And they know a lot of the pitfalls that are going to happen or that are going to come with owning a business. Where the guy that's $100,000 salaried employee or $100,000 in the bank and is a salaried employee, he has a vision or a dream, but he doesn't know, right, what it's like because he's not perhaps owned a business before. So the conversations between the two are different. Just because the W-2 employee has to assess all the risk going forward versus the guy who's already owned the business, he's already been there, done that. Those conversations are a little bit different.
So now when we move a bit forward and when it comes to the seller of the business, and you've said like meaningful questions for you as a banker, and even like 3 very important questions. Why is the seller selling? And then you want to know about the seller. When did the seller take his vacation? Where did it go?
Yeah.
And for how long?
That's right.
The answers, depending of the answers of these questions, what information does it give to you?
So the first, and it's such an important question, and I would beg every person listening to your terrific podcast to ask those questions of the seller. When's the last time you took a vacation? Where did you go? And for how long? And that tells you if you're buying a me business. And I made a tweet or post on Twitter about a transaction for a young man who was buying a business in Texas. And he came to the bank, we approved his loan was in closing. So we got his loan done and it's in closing. He called me up one day and he said, Bruce, I've got some concerns. And I said, well, what's your concerns? And I'll just say his name, generic Joe. His name wasn't Joe, but I'm just going to use that as a generic name. And I said, Joe, what's your concerns? And he says, I'm concerned that am I going to be able to fulfill his shoes and do what he does? I said, do you know what he does? He says, I have an idea, but not exactly. And I said to him, well, then you need to do a ride along. And you need to pay attention on how many times his phone rings, what's his day look like, where he goes, and then ask him those 3 questions. So he did that. And a couple of days later, called me back and said, the deal is off. I'm not buying the business. I'm walking. Even though he had spent the money for the Q of E, we had the business value, had spent a lot of money because he realized that he couldn't fill this guy's shoes. Why? Because he couldn't replicate what that guy did inside the business. And when you ask those kind of questions, you will know if you're buying what I call a me business. In other words, I'm driving that business. The business exists because of me. Maybe I'm the guy with the connections. Maybe I'm the guy with the relationships. Maybe I'm the one bringing in 60% of the sales revenue, right? If there's problems, are they going to the staff or are they coming to me? So understanding the motivation of the seller and what the seller's skill set is and what you bring to the table. Because the thought of this, Nick, is that when you buy a small business, upside is theoretical. That's what you always think. I can do it better. I can build it. The seller's at $1 million in EBITDA, and I'm going to take it to $1.5 million. And that $500,000 at a 4 turn is going to put $2 million in my pocket. That's the belief. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. But as you know, in doing this podcast in 71, the J curve is real. It's real. It happens. And I can tell you as a business owner, it happens. Because yes, I work at First Bank of the Lake every day. That's my day job. But I also own several businesses. And that's what happens. And sometimes businesses make it. Sometimes businesses don't. And so it becomes very, very important. The seller's willingness to hold a note also shows his support of what he feels the business is going to do going forward. If the seller is not willing to hold a note, it should be a red flag. If a seller says, I don't want to sign a 5-year non-compete, it's a non-starter for me. I'm out. And I'm out because I am afraid for the buyer because I have had experience. The one thing that I bring to the table versus most of the SBA lenders out there is I've been doing this for 40 years. There's nothing somebody's going to bring to me that I haven't seen. I have seen it all. And experience, they tell you, is the best teacher. And I will tell you the same because I have it. And I've seen it. And I've seen when it's I had a transaction, this goes back probably about 8 or 9 years ago. 2 partners, one was living in Michigan at the time, one was living in Chicago. And they were buying a business in South Florida. And I told them, oh, one's going to spend 1 week down here, one's going to spend the other week, we're going to blah, 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 blah. And I said, you're going to end up moving to Florida because you can't run a business remotely, not like this. Anyway, ultimately, they both moved to Florida. I was right. But they had signed a 3-year non-compete. And they said, we have 100% direct industry experience. We know this business. If we can't make it in 3 years, blah, 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 blah. So after 2.5 years of owning the business, they go to a conference and they see the seller there at this conference. And they go up to him and they go, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm visiting some friends. I've been out of the business for a couple of years. I want to reestablish some relationships. I want to say hi. They leave the conference. They get a couple of calls within the next couple of weeks. He's thinking about going back into business again. And a couple of months later, right before the 3 years, he had reached out to these guys, 2 top clients, and he got them back. And the 3 years came over. He'd only signed a 3-year non-compete. He went into business and he stole 2 of the clients, and they're 2 top clients, and it almost put them out of business. That's a tough, I mean, it was, he had called it governance calls, and every other week I was on the phone with him and we're talking about strategy. What do we have to do? How do we replace, these accounts? Hiring the correct salespeople, taking a look at bringing in experience. I mean, it was, and I know one of your questions was this follow-up and thorough, and that's what a relationship should be with. Anybody who chooses their banker should have the ability to call that banker, especially when they need them, and say, how can you help? How can you help me? And it's not, for the people on the podcast that are listening, oftentimes it's not about who offers you a 1/4 or 0.5% better. It's who's going to be there for you when you need them. Like at First Bank of the Lake, we don't sell our loans. So we portfolio them, we keep them. But all SBA lenders are going to be there to service. But you want to make sure you're dealing with a lender that's going to be there for you. It doesn't have a history of jumping every couple of years because they haven't met their goals. You want to make sure when you're diligencing who you choose, you want to make sure you're choosing somebody that you know and you feel comfortable is going to be there just in case. Hopefully it never happens. It's like I tell people, I get projections, Mick, and they always just 5% growth, 5% growth. So like I had in business for 13 years. Do you think from the day I started to 13 years later, it just went like this? That's not reality. That is not reality. So, all of it matters. It really does, right? So you really want to make sure that you're diligencing the bank that's going to be there. I get this question a lot. Well, Bruce, what if I want a second loan? And I've used up $4 million of my guarantee and the max is 5. What can I do? And I'm buying a synergistic company. I want to do a little bit of roll-up. You have to make sure you're working with the lender who's going to be able to provide you with that extra pari passu strip, like we do. I closed a transaction about 5 months ago for a company out in California. It was in the backflow business. Great client. We made him a loan. First loan was about $3.2 million. About a year and a half later, he came and he found a similar size backflow company in another part of California. And we were able to give him a second $3.5 million loan. But total, the exposure was well over the $5 million. But because we're a pari passu lender, we were able to do it and accommodate him. Mm-hmm. Right? Because once you have an SBA loan and the bank has tied up the assets, it's tough to go get another one. Or it's tough if you've bumped up against your $5 million guarantee. Now with the different NAICS code, that's a different, as you know, you saw in my recent Twitter post, that's moved the needle, right? So these are all the kind of changes that we see in SBA lending, but there's just a lot that goes into it, right? There's a lot of times my conversations with searchers, when I'm having these calls, to go back to reference your point earlier, it encompasses all of that. It's not just about, you know, I always tell people, if you call me and we spend an hour on the phone, literally 5 minutes will be about SBA. The other 55 minutes will be about the business and the dynamics, and does it make sense, and are you the right fit, and is it the right cash flow, but you know, just all the other factors that go into whether it's a good lower middle market, you know, M&A deal. I told you I'll be able to fill 60 minutes. I wasn't shy about that. I have a lot to say about that, but
I have a follow-up question about this. How often does those so-called bad things happen? Like the one you shared the story, like 3 years went by and the seller came back and started over again. How often things like this happen?
Great question. I'm not sure I really know the answer. Fortunately, not a lot. But, you know, War Story Saturday came about as a result of all of these stories, right? So a lot of, you know, there's been some really, really bad stories. There's been some stories that, you know, started out bad and then turned out okay. And then, you know, obviously great stories that even got better, right? But it just depends. But those little red flags are one of the things that I try to stay away from. So if a client calls me and says, and I'll give you another perfect example. I had a client, I was working with him. We were looking at a business and we were almost a year into it. And it didn't end up working. And he ended up going to buy another business. And he came to me and he said, there's 2 women sellers and they will only sign a non-compete for 2 years. And I said to him, I will not do your deal. And I spent a year with him on this. And he says, I'm comfortable with it. I said, I'm glad you are. I'm not. And whatever they're telling you, I don't believe them. Because my experience tells me that I'm right. And I hope I'm wrong for you. Right? So I'll take that. If a seller comes in and says, oh, I did $1 million in EBITDA in 23 and 2 million in 24, and I want a $10 million purchase price, that conversation is going to be different, right? Than the guy that says, oh, they did $1 million in 23 and 1.15 in 24. Because I'm going to go, if he wants a 5 multiple on 2 million, he wants $10 million. If that crawled back a year for whatever happens, that business at 1 million is now only worth 5. Why are you going to give him a $5 million valuation increase for 1 year's of performance? What if it goes back to 23? What's that look like for you? Right? So those kind of conversations, and then will he hold a note? And maybe he should be the one holding a note for that upside. Right? Will he put it on standby? Will he not? How do we get that deal to the closing table? Versus the guy, the seller that says, I'm willing to hold 30%. Great. That's a seller that knows his business, believes in his business, believes in the buyer, and says, okay, maybe I'll defer some taxes, which is great. I'll make some interest, which is great. I know my company, which is great. Yeah, this makes sense. And they become a co-borrower with us.
You've said it, you call it the 3 Gs of a good deal. Lending to a good people, buying good businesses with good cash flow. What is the statistic when it comes to people coming to you with, high quality people wanting to acquire a high quality business? Obviously it's a dream, but do we have enough high quality people buying high quality businesses is my question.
Yes, a lot. Mm-hmm. A lot. For me, it starts with the first G, which is a good business. It has to start there. It has to be a business that I feel is really sustainable, has been around a while to withstand some cycles, has a good business model. I understand why it exists and why it will exist and why it will exist arguably for the next 10 and hopefully 20 years. Because if you're a searcher and you buy a business, you're going to exit one way or another, whether you want to or you don't. You're going to exit at some point. And if it's on your choice, which hopefully it is, hopefully the business is around for you to do it. Right? So I get very deep into looking at the industry the business is in, how long they've been in there, how they make their money, why they make their money, why they exist, why are they sustainable, how have they worked through the cycles. I mean, just getting really very granular about lending to a good business. Because for me, I look at it and I say, if the business was doing great 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and a year ago, but I lend now to the wrong guy, lending to good people now, hopping into two, is it really going to matter that it had 2 million in EBITDA 3 years ago? Right? So we always talk about betting on the right jockey, right? So let's say the Triple Crown winner is running in the second race and we're all excited, ready to make a large bet. And then all of a sudden they come on and they say the jockey is out sick and they're going to put Bruce Marks in the saddle. So you turn to me, Mick, and you go, hey, Bruce, you ever ridden a horse? Nope. You think you can get it out of the starting gate? I don't know. You're not making that bet, right? Even though you got a pedigree horse and you know he's a Triple Crown winner, you're not making that bet. That's real as a lender. That's very, very, very real. And I always tell clients, listen, just because you come to me and you want a loan, it doesn't mean that I'm going to do it. Like borrowers and searchers have a choice of lenders, I have a choice of who I'm going to lend to, right? And people sometimes get upset if I pass on their deal, and I tell them, don't get upset. If I'm not the right guy, or just go somewhere else. You'll persevere. If it's a good deal, somebody's going to do it, right? Just maybe means that I'm not. So the lending to good people, it's creditworthy people, obviously. People that have shown that they know how to handle their financials. That's why we run credit reports, and from that basis, have, if it's a great resume and they're buying obviously in a business that they like. And I'll give you an example. I was speaking with a gentleman that I'm pretty close with. We've become close over the last 8 or 9 months. We've looked at a number of deals. And I said to him yesterday, you are looking at a business that I think is perfectly suited for you and your skill set. But what you don't bring to the table is the financial acumen to do it. You don't. And he said, Bruce, I don't disagree with you. You're 100% right. I said, you have to make sure you have a really good finance person in there that you can trust, because this is a big business and you'll know too late if this guy that you do put in there steals from you. And believe me, it happens. I've seen it. Like I said, there's nothing I haven't seen. Where partners walked into my office and said, Bruce, this guy's like my brother. I love him. We've been best friends for 20 years. And 2 years later, they're in court suing one another. I'm sure it's life, right? Life happens. This is real. This happens, right? So I'm going to get really granular with the borrower and go, this is why you're the right bet, or this is why you're right not. And to your point that you mentioned, your personal financial statement isn't going to change that. Mm-hmm. Right? It might give you a little bit more support. God forbid you get into trouble. But I'm not going to look at it and say, well, Mick, you've got $1 million in the bank and you want to buy a restaurant, but you've never run a restaurant. Hey, look, I like to eat too. Right? But that doesn't mean I'm going to lend to you just because you like to eat. Right? If you don't have restaurant experience, go and get it if you want to own a restaurant. Don't just come to the lender and say, oh, I want to buy a restaurant. It was kind of like me. I wanted to do this. I wanted to become an expert in this. I wanted to become a celebrity in this space. I had to go get the credentials to do it. So I did. And I tell people that all the time. If you love an industry and you want to buy a business in that industry and you're 30 years old, you can take a year or two to go learn that business and then buy it. You still got plenty of tailwind. Do it. Do it. That will take the second G. The third G is obviously lending to a good, strong cash flowing business, right? Here's my thought philosophy. If you come to me and you say, Bruce, I'm buying a $400,000 SDE business and I'm paying a 4 multiple, it's $1.6 million. And that business does not come with working capital because they never do it that size. And you have closing costs. So maybe your deal now is $1.8 million. And you go, great, I'm going to put in $180,000, 10%. And the seller's going to hold a note for $180,000, depending upon what his terms and conditions are. So that's $360,000. So you've got a loan now of $1.8 million minus $360,000, which is $1.440 million. You're going to have loan payments of around, let's just round it up to $19,000. Times 12 is $228,000. If you're a searcher, you're looking $125,000, right? So now you have to add on $125,000. So now you're at $353,000, and maybe you've got a seller note in there. That's maybe another $10,000 or $15,000. You're up to $375,000. The business is only throwing off $400,000. That business has a hiccup or a sneeze or something slightly comes off, Mick, you're in trouble. Versus a guy that says, hey, I'm buying $1.5 million EBITDA business and I'm paying a $4.5 million business. I'm paying 4.5 times, right? So he's paying, let's say, $6,750,000. That business is going to include working capital, right? And maybe with deal fees, it gets up to $7 million. So you put in 10%, $700,000. He puts in $700,000. So you're at $1.4 million, right? You're going to have loan payments of maybe $65,000 a month. Times 12 is $780,000. Give yourself $150,000, and then the seller note. You're going to have $400,000 left over versus the other smaller one where you got 25. I'm taking that one because it reduces my risk. Because there's plenty of excess cash flow to withstand some downward trend, the J curve, or a hiccup or a sneeze. And so the deals that I do, to your question, the quality of those deals. You said, are there a lot of quality of those deals? Am I seeing a quality of those three G's of a good deal? I see plenty of them. I see a lot of them. And this market is for sure getting saturated just because of folks like you that are doing this and educating. The number of colleges that are having ETA programs, the number of private equity folks saying, I don't want to be in private equity anymore. I want to now go do this for myself. Mm-hmm. Right? All the conferences that are out there. And then all the search fund like incubators that have started that say, we're setting up a pool to invest in small business, right? People like me, people on Twitter, people on social media. The SMB ETA is just blowing up. It's just getting really, really big. And so you've got a ton of quality people coming out and going, I want to make, there's a number of baby boomers like me, I'm a baby boomer, that are retiring, that have built these businesses, that have been running it, started with a truck and a handsaw, right? And now they've got a business that's, doing $1.5 million in EBITDA, and they want to have their liquidity event and they want to sell.
What it all means to you and what it means for First Bank of the Lake. Will you double your assets within the next 3-4 years, you reckon?
Yes, we want to. We love, one of the things that I admire about our leadership team here at the bank is we live with the thought of doing well by doing good, right? We will do well if we do good. Mm-hmm. And that has certainly been the case. Not going to lie. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what this bank has been able to accomplish. And I'm very proud of all the folks that we've been able to help and help fulfill their dreams of becoming entrepreneurs and owning their own businesses. It's fantastic. I keep in touch with a lot of the folks that I've lent to. It's phenomenal to hear their stories and how successful these folks are. You know, I tweeted about a young man who took $40,000 and bought a $10 million business, right? That's where else? So at the end of the day, he's going to end up with 70% of the cap table once he pays off his pref. And if he does nothing over the next 10 years, but to keep that business the same where it is, he'll have 70% of a $10 million business free and clear with the start of $40,000. I don't care what real estate you're buying. You're not doing that. You're not. It's just a phenomenal, and he's a high quality person, great from a top-notch business school with an MBA, served in the military. He's absolutely the type of person you want to support. And I'm proud that we did it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I absolutely see us going way beyond. I mean, if we're a $1.6 billion institution now, do I see us going past that, doubling that? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know how many years, but we have a phenomenal leadership group that wants to support entrepreneurs.
I want to know about one specific difficult situation post-acquisition, because I think we'll learn more from those. And you've seen them all, so that's why. There's one you said many times that the worst thing ever happened to a seller is to buy a business and then have your stuff come to you and ask you a question and you don't know the answer. Sorry, the buyer.
Right.
Like, how often do you see these things happen and how you can avoid those things to happen?
They don't happen a lot because that's when I say, I'm going to pass on the deal. Mm-hmm. Let me give you a personal experience. I was working at a financial institution. I don't want to say which one. And we have a phenomenal team, and the bank decided to move in a different direction, so to speak. And they brought in somebody to head up our SBA group who had no SBA experience. But they had experience in building different parts of the bank. But they put him in charge of the SBA group. And so I had a very technical question. And so I called this individual. And I asked him the question. And his comment was, Bruce, I don't know the answer to that question. And I went, you're right. I do know you don't know it. Why did you ask? I said, I'm asking because I'm trying to still determine why you were the right guy for this role. That was personal. And I think of that when I look at a business and I look at the person who's coming to me for a loan. If you have an architectural engineering firm and you want to buy it because you love that space, and you have all these architects coming to you who are now, you're the leader, you're the owner, this is your business, and they're going to come to you with specific questions. How do you gain the respect of somebody when you can't answer that question? And it's just one of the things that I drill down to as part of that analysis of, are you the right jockey on the horse? Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen a lot because I will just stop at that point. I ask my borrowers to fill out a very specific management section with very specific questions so I can get comfortable with the skill set that the seller is leaving and the skill set that the buyer has to replace that role. If it's, hey, I want to buy a landscaping business, no, I don't expect you to be out there in the field cutting the lawn, trimming the trees, doing the bushes, right? So the skill set is going to look different in that type of business than the skill set for running a restaurant and understanding what it takes. I want to share a story with you. So I think it's really, it's a story that resonated with me. It still sticks with me to this day. I was a young man. I was in my lending career. And I had gotten a loan request. When you're a lender and you have a commercial portfolio, when you go into a bank, you inherit a loan portfolio. So I was a lending officer in a bank, and I inherited a loan, and one of them was a restaurant. And the borrower had called me up and said, Bruce, I want a loan. I want to open up a second location. I said, okay, great. I said, where is it? He told me the location. I said, I'd love to see it. I'll meet you there. So I drove to the location where this person wanted to open up his second restaurant. And I'm envisioning it as I'm telling the story because it's that vivid to me, even though it was years and years and years ago. And we walked in and he said to me, what do you notice? I said, it's small. He said, you're right. It's small. He said, there's 15 tables in this restaurant. It wasn't big. So we do the tour and he's going through his list of needs, the leasehold improvements, what he was doing. And then he said to me something. He said, Bruce, he said, who do you think and what role do you think will be the most important person at this restaurant establishment? And I said, the chef? He said, absolutely wrong. And I said, the waiter, keeping things moving, going on. And he said, absolutely wrong. I said, the general manager, because he's going to dictate everything and he's going to know the flow and he's going to do. And he said, absolutely wrong. And I said to him, I don't know. He said, one of the highest paid employees in this establishment will be, and the guy that will make everything move is my head dishwasher. And I was perplexed. I said, I don't understand. He said, we have 15 tables. We have so many plates. We have so much food. If this guy doesn't keep those plates in the rotation and the plates clean so the chef can put on the food and the plates available so the waitresses and the bar staff can have blah, 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 he says, I will be out of business. He said, and it's a point like that will put somebody out of business if they don't understand the restaurant business and how the dynamics of a restaurant business works. And it left a huge impression on me, obviously, because I'm telling this story 25 years later. Mm-hmm. But I'll never forget that day because what he taught me was something that nobody else could have taught me. And so I use that experience and that specific example when I get into a conversation with a searcher about the businesses that they're looking at to acquire. Why are they a fit? Why are they the right one? Why is this the right one? And a lot of times as a lender, it's a judgmental call for sure. And we all have prejudices, right? So one of the questions I think you wanted to know is, kind of the businesses that I stay away from. I literally had a searcher reach out to me today and he sent me an email. He says, Bruce, attached is the sim I'm looking at. Attached is my draft LOI. Want to get your opinion on this deal. And I get that a lot, Mick, right? Like people are just, hey, Bruce, what do you think? Does this meet whatever? And I wrote back and I said, I'm entitled to my personal opinion, and I will not even, take a look at this deal. It's a pass for me. And here's 3 very specific reasons why. I didn't like the business. I didn't like the business model, and it was a want business. And I do not finance want businesses. I don't like it. So let me give you an example. Mick calls me up and says, Bruce, I'm buying a light manufacturing business. Do you do light manufacturing? Yep. Let's drill down on the CapEx and the working capital, man. But we're going to have a big discussion on that. Okay, great. Bruce, I'm buying the real estate with the business. I'm paying $4.5 million for the whole thing. I'm paying $2.5 million for the real estate, $2 million for the business. So it's like 125-year loan. Okay. What do they build? What do they manufacture? Kayaks. Nope. Done. I'm out. That's a true story, by the way. Didn't make that one up. I said, nope, I'm out. Done. Why? Because nobody needs a kayak the last I checked. And it's a want business. And I'm not saying that people don't want them. They do. But it's just not me who's going to finance it. And it doesn't mean it's not a good deal, and it doesn't mean it shouldn't get done. It's just, I'm sharing with your audience, I have a prejudice. I'm not doing it. And the funny part about this is, and especially for your audience to understand is when you reach out to a lender and they say, what does your bank like? Bruce, what is your bank like? Bruce, what are your guidelines? What does your bank want to see? Guess what? It's mine. The bank might have loved that deal. I don't know. I passed on it. I said no. I said no on behalf of the bank. Why? Because it's my opinion. That's why I always tell everybody, and I tweet this all the time. Banks interpret the SOP differently. There are a number of lenders. You gotta make sure you get to the right one who likes your deal, who you feel comfortable can get your deal to the closing table, and is going to be there for you when you need them. But it's like ice cream. There's 62 or 32 or 64 flavors. I don't know. Why? Because everybody has a different like.
So very personal question to you, Bruce. As you've seen over your career, you've seen everything. You've seen the wildest success stories, like the one you mentioned, this extremely wise young man if everything goes well, he will turn 40,000 to, who knows, 7 million plus in 10 years. And you also mentioned you've made some acquisitions yourself, you made some investments yourself, and you previously said this is the reason why folks will leave private equity to buy those deals themselves. So why haven't you gone all in, just buying businesses and not doing what you're doing now?
I have a saying, and it goes something like this. You love what you do when you'd rather be doing it than not. So you have a choice, and if you choose to do what it is you do, you love what it is that you do. I have my own business for 13 years. I've been there, done that. I love what I do every day. And frankly, that's why I do it, just to be clear. I have the choice. I have that luxury. And I choose to do this. I don't want to have the responsibility of, at my age, going in every day and doing all the things that a small business owner has to do. I want to leave that to the guy. I'm the baby boomer. I'm the guy that's exiting, right? For all you young folks, I always say this, you guys are climbing that mountain. Dude, I'm on my bike riding downhill. Right? I'm coasting. I'm not even pedaling at this point, Mick. I'm just like... But I feel that I can make the most impact and do the most good, doing well by doing good, by doing what it is I do every day. And I'm all in 100% what I do every day. But you need people to run the businesses. You need people to work in the businesses. You need the lenders. You need the attorneys. You need all aspects I've been there. I've done that. I've seen that. And I can tell you that in all of it, this and what I do every day in my role, I love the most. So it's my choice to not go all in on that end. It's my choice to do this.
This is awesome. Thanks for being so transparent.
Of course.
I think it's extremely important message for young people, because sometimes we tend to do things we think we like, but when you actually do it for years and years, you see that the reason you were doing it was something else, and it wasn't that you actually wanted to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one more detailed question, and then we can finish. You tweeted just a few days ago, actually, that I will read it to you. Bruce, I already have an exiting SBA loan for 4 million. I have found another business I would like to purchase. I heard that the SBA now allows a borrower to have multiple loans. Is that true? Can you help? What did you say? What did you say to this person?
Yes, I can help. The SBA has provided the ability for a business owner who already has an existing SBA loan to purchase another business and get another SBA loan. Prior to the new SOP, you could have one guarantor up to a $5 million loan, and that was it. But they changed the affiliation rules, and they threw in, if it's a different, what they call NAICS code, which is North American Industry Classification System. So on a tax return, on the top left-hand corner of the tax return, there's a 6-digit code that identifies the nature of the business. That's the tax return is being filed on. So if you're in manufacturing, for example, it's going to have a 6-digit number, and that tells the IRS that this is a tax return for the specific industry. And so the SBA has said, if you are in an industry, let's say like restaurant, and now you want to buy a food distribution business, right? And it's food related, but it's got a totally different 3-digit ending NAICS code, that you can now do that. And so there are lenders out there that now say, okay, you have a loan for this one specific business. It's not a synergistic acquisition, or it's not a roll-up, or it's not a bolt-on, or all the other terms that folks like to use and do use. It's an acquisition of a totally different business. You can do it.
Okay, so let's wrap up with quick fire questions. How old are you, Bruce?
Old enough to be your father.
Okay. Favorite book?
I'm going to go with Nick's because it's a book that changed my life, and it's called Celebrity Branding You, only because that was just so impactful for me.
What's the best investment advice you've ever got?
Only invest with what you can afford to lose.
Okay, and last one, where can people find you?
So they can find me on X, and my handle is at SBABmarks. And on Saturdays, most Saturdays, not every Saturday because I'm on vacation or if things don't happen that are really worth noting about on a weekday. But I write War Stories Saturday, which is what you've referenced a few times. And it's authentic, that I will tell folks, and it's based upon real experiences, good or bad. I will post on a Saturday when I have something to post about. I won't when I don't. But it's 100% real. I'm always intrigued by comments that I get and say, oh, this is a nice story, Bruce, if it were only real. Well, if it's on there, it's because it's real. You want to believe it, great. You don't want to believe it, I go, okay, don't. So on Twitter, and then they can obviously reach out to me at the bank. So BMarks, B-Marks, M-A-R-K-S, at fblake.bank, B-A-N-K. So bmarks at fblake.bank.
Okay, so thanks again. It's 70 minutes. I really enjoyed that. I learned so much. I'm reading your
Thank you.
stuff. Now I'm so happy that we were finally able to talk. So thanks a
Yes.
lot for doing this.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting me on. Congrats on all your success. And I hope this is a little part of that.